I literally sold the roof over my head to save my parents' legacy, and 5 minutes later, they handed the keys to the person who almost burned it down. My brother Ryan sat across from me smirking while my mother explained that the family business needed a man in charge, not a spinster. They thought I would cry. They thought I would beg. They had no idea that while they were planning my exit, I was already finalizing their eviction. Before I tell you how I brought an entire hotel empire to its knees, with one phone call please, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been the family bank but treated like the family burden. My name is Claire, and at 34 years old, I thought I had seen the bottom of my family's ungratefulness. But I was wrong. The ink was barely dry on the check I had just placed on the heavy oak conference table. $450,000. That was the price of my freedom, my sanctuary, my downtown Chicago condo with the view of the lake. I had liquidated everything to cover the balloon payment that threatened to foreclose the Ellington Heritage, our family hotel that had stood on Bronzeville specifically since 1925. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from the sheer weight of what I had just sacrificed. My father sat at the head of the table adjusting his silk tie, avoiding my gaze. I expected a thank you, or perhaps a moment of silence for the asset I had just successfully protected. Instead, my father cleared his throat and looked at my younger brother Ryan. Ryan was 29 and had never held a job for longer than 6 months yet. There he sat wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, looking bored. "Well, Claire," my father started, his voice booming in the quiet room, "we appreciate the financial bridge. It was necessary. However, now that the debt is cleared, your mother and I have made a decision about the future leadership of the Ellington." I sat up straighter. I had been running the operations as a consultant for 3 years, fixing the mess Ryan made whenever he tried to help. I assumed this was the moment they would finally make me the official CEO. My mother reached out and patted Ryan's hand. "We feel that the hotel needs a strong male figurehead to really capture the corporate market," she said, her voice dripping with that poisonous sweetness I knew too well. "Ryan has that natural charisma. We are appointing Ryan as the new CEO, effective immediately." The air left my lungs. Ryan, the boy who once used the company credit card to buy a jet ski in Illinois in November. I looked at them, waiting for the punchline. But Ashley, Ryan's wife, was beaming. She leaned forward, her blonde hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. "It is so exciting, Claire," she said, her voice high and grating. "Ryan and I have so many ideas. The hotel is just so dusty and old-fashioned. We are going to turn it into something actually Instagrammable." I looked at the check again. My life savings, gone. Handed over to save a sinking ship that they just put a hole in. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I just stared at Ryan. He leaned back in the leather chair, crossed his legs, and gave me a smirk that made my blood run cold. "Thanks for clearing the runway, sis," he said, winking. "I think I can take it from here." I stared at my brother, then at my parents. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner that I had personally paid to have repaired last summer. "You cannot be serious," I finally said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Ryan thinks a profit and loss statement is a sandwich order. I have spent 3 years restructuring our debt, negotiating with vendors, and practically living in this office. And you are handing him the keys because he is what exactly? Male." My mother let out a dramatic sigh, the kind she reserved for when I was being difficult, which in her eyes was whenever I spoke the truth. "Claire, honey, lower your voice," she scolded, smoothing her skirt. "It is not about gender, it is about optics. The hospitality industry is aggressive. It requires a certain masculine energy to really command respect in the boardroom. You are wonderful at the details, sweetheart. You are so organized. But Ryan has the vision. He is a natural leader. A natural leader." The man was currently using a coaster to clean his fingernails. "Leader," I repeated, incredulity seeping into my tone. "Mom, last month I had to bail him out of a poker debt so the bookies would not show up at the front desk. Is that the leadership you are referring to? That is enough, Claire, my father snapped, slamming his hand on the table. Do not bring up personal matters. This is a business decision. Ryan is the face of the future. You represent the traditional side of things. Which brings us to another point. He gestured to Ashley, who perked up like a show dog waiting for a treat. Exactly. Ashley chirped, flashing a smile that did not reach her eyes. Look, Claire, we appreciate what you have done keeping the lights on. Really. But let us be honest. The decor, the vibe, it is so heavy. All this dark wood and jazz history, it feels like a funeral home. We want to pivot, lighten it up. More beige, more minimalism, less history. She waved her hand around the room, dismissing 70 years of black excellence as heavy. My grandfather had built this place when hotels in downtown Chicago would not let people like us through the front door. He had hand-carved the mahogany banisters, and Ashley wanted to paint them beige. It is called heritage. Ashley, I said, coldness settling in my chest. It is called outdated, she countered, her voice dropping the sweet act for a split second. And frankly, we do not need a consultant anymore. We need a clean slate. So maybe you should take a break. Go find a husband. Let the men handle the business. My mother nodded in agreement. She is right, Claire. You look tired. You have been working so hard. Take the money from the condo sale and— oh wait, that is right. You put it all here. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. The cruelty hung in the air. They had taken my money, my home, and my dignity, and now they were dismissing me like hired help. I looked around the office. The framed photo of my grandfather seemed to be looking at me with sorrow. I realized then that this was not my family. This was a board of directors for a company I no longer owned shares in. I was not their daughter or sister. I was an ATM that had finally run out of cash. I stood up slowly, picking up my purse. I did not cry. Tears were for people who still had hope. I had something better. I had a plan. The next morning I arrived at the Ellington, hoping the previous day had been a fever dream, but reality hit me the moment the elevator doors opened on the executive floor. There was a pile of cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly in the hallway, right next to the janitor closet. I recognized the spine of my hospitality management degree sticking out of a box marked miscellaneous. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked toward the corner office that had been my second home for 3 years. The door was wide open, and the sound of upbeat pop music was blasting from inside. Ashley was standing in the center of the room, wearing a white linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than the housekeeping staff's monthly salary. She was directing 2 men in coveralls who were moving my heavy mahogany desk, the one my grandfather had sat behind when he signed the original deed to the land. I stood in the doorway, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the scene. Ashley finally noticed me and clapped her hands together like she was delighted to see me. "Oh, good, you are here, Claire," she said, her voice bright and airy. "I had the movers pack up your things. Since you are going to be taking a step back, Ryan and I thought it would be best if we set up our command center immediately. We need fresh energy." I watched as she picked up the crystal nameplate from the desk. It read, Claire Williams, Executive Director. It was a gift from the staff after I saved us from bankruptcy the first time. Ashley looked at it for a second, frowned slightly, and then dropped it into the large trash bin by the door. The sound of the heavy crystal hitting the bottom of the metal bin echoed like a gunshot. "Oops," she giggled, covering her mouth. "Well, you will not be needing that anymore, right? We are going to transition to a more flat hierarchy. Titles are so old school." I walked over to the wall where a collection of black and white photographs hung. They were images of the hotel's opening day in 1925, showing black doctors, lawyers, and musicians celebrating in a space that treated them like royalty. Ashley had already taken down half of them. In their place, she was leaning large canvas prints against the wall. They were abstract swirls of beige and gray, soulless, generic. The kind of art you buy in bulk for a dentist office waiting room. "Ashley, what are you doing with the archives?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Those photos are historic artifacts. She waved a dismissive hand. They are just so dark, Claire. We want the space to feel open and welcoming to everyone. Those old photos make the room feel heavy. We are going to put them in storage in the basement. Do not worry, they will be safe. She turned her back to me, focusing her attention on the two painters who had just walked in, carrying buckets and drop cloths. She pointed a manicured finger at the walls. The walls that were paneled in rich dark oak hand, carved and varnished to perfection. Wood that had absorbed the history of my family for a century. "All right, guys, listen up," she commanded. "I want all of this dark wood covered up. Primer, and then 2 coats of alabaster white. Paint over everything. We need to brighten this place up until it looks like a brand new day." I walked out of the hotel service entrance, my heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I did not go home to cry. Tears were a luxury I could not afford, and quite frankly, my family did not deserve them. Instead, I sat in my car, took a deep breath, and dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "David speaking." "David, it is Claire," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I need you to pull the file on the Ellington debt transfer, specifically the addendum regarding the default clauses." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of typing. David was not just my lawyer, he was my college roommate, and the only person who knew exactly how much I had sacrificed for my family. "Claire, what happened?" he asked, his tone shifting from professional to concerned. "Did they pay you back?" I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "No, David, they did not pay me back. They fired me. Well, technically, they replaced me. Ryan is the new CEO, and Ashley is currently painting over the mahogany walls in the lobby. I need to know where I stand. I bought the debt from the bank, so I am the lien holder, correct?" "Correct," David said slowly. "You are the primary creditor. The bank transferred all rights to you when you paid off the loan." "Okay," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "So if they violate the terms of the mortgage, I can foreclose." "Technically, yes," David explained, "but it is not that simple, Claire. The contract has a grace period for missed payments, and since you are family, a judge might view a sudden foreclosure as malicious, especially if they are making the minimum interest payments. To trigger an immediate takeover without a long court battle, you need a material breach of contract, something bigger than a missed utility bill." I watched as a delivery truck pulled up to the loading dock, carrying what looked like expensive modern furniture. Ryan and Ashley were already spending money they did not have. I thought about Ryan's history of gambling and Ashley's obsession with appearances. They were not going to be satisfied with just redecorating. They were going to leverage the business. "What constitutes a material breach?" I asked. David sighed. "Unauthorized second liens. If they try to take out another loan using the building as collateral without your written permission as the primary lien holder, that is an instant default. It triggers the acceleration clause, meaning the entire debt becomes due immediately. If they cannot pay you, take the keys." "But Claire, why would they do that? They just got debt-free." "Because they are greedy and stupid," I said, watching Ryan step out of the service door to sign for the delivery. He looked like a child playing dress-up in a suit that was too expensive for him. Ryan wants to play big shot, and Ashley wants a renovation budget that the cash flow cannot support. They will need cash fast. "So you are going to wait for them to hang themselves?" David asked. "I am not just going to wait," I said, starting the engine. "I am going to hand them the rope. Keep the paperwork ready, David. When they slip up, and they will slip up, I want to be ready to strike before the ink is dry." I hung up the phone and pulled out of the parking lot. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the building my grandfather built. It looked vulnerable. But for the first time in years, I did not feel helpless. I felt dangerous. They wanted a war, they were going to get one. But unlike them, I was not fighting for attention. I was fighting for ownership. And I never lose. The first all-hands meeting under the new leadership was scheduled for 9 in the morning, but at 9:25, the ballroom was still buzzing with nervous whispers. I stood in the back near the service entrance, leaning against the wall. I technically did not have to be there, but my mother had insisted, claiming it would show a united front. The truth was, she wanted me to witness my replacement. The staff looked tired. Many of them had worked double shifts during the financial crisis to keep us afloat, and they were expecting the raises I had promised them once the debt was cleared. Instead, they got Ryan. At 9:30, the double doors swung open, and Ryan strolled in wearing sunglasses indoors, holding a latte. Ashley trailed behind him, tapping away on her phone, not even looking up to acknowledge the 50 people waiting for them. Ryan walked up to the podium and tapped the microphone, sending a screech of feedback through the room that made everyone wince. He did not apologize for being late. He did not thank them for their hard work. He just grinned. "All right, everyone, let's keep this brief." Ryan started taking a sip of his coffee. "As you know, there are some big changes happening at the Ellington. We are moving towards a more modern, streamlined operation. And to do that, we need to trim the fat. Effective immediately, we are pausing all overtime pay and freezing the annual bonuses. We need to allocate those funds to the renovation budget." A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Sarah, the head housekeeper, clutch her chest. She had been counting on that bonus to pay for her son's tuition. Heads turned toward me. Dozens of eyes pleading for me to step in, to say something, to fix it like I always did. I felt a physical pull in my chest, a desperate urge to walk up there and snatch the mic. But I remembered David's words. Let them hang themselves. I clenched my jaw tight, looked at Sarah, and slowly shook my head. I turned my gaze to the floor, refusing to be the savior they wanted, because I needed to be the executioner they needed. "Excuse me." The deep, gravelly voice of Otis, the executive chef, cut through the tension. He stood up, his white chef coat spotless, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He had been with the hotel since before Ryan was born. "Mr. Ryan, you cannot cut overtime. My kitchen staff is already working skeleton shifts. If you cut their pay, you will lose them. You cannot run a fine dining restaurant on minimum wage and goodwill." Ryan stopped smiling. He leaned over the podium, staring down at the man who had cooked his birthday dinners for 20 years. "Otis, right," Ryan said, his tone dripping with condescension. "See, this is exactly the kind of negative attitude we are trying to eliminate. If you cannot manage your team within the new budget, maybe you are not the right fit for the new Ellington. Sit down or pack your knives. I suggest you remember who signs your checks now." The room went deathly silent. Otis looked at me one last time, saw my inaction, and slowly sat down. But the look in his eyes was not fear. It was pure fury. Ryan had just made his first enemy, and he had no idea that Otis knew where all the skeletons were buried. 2 days after the disastrous staff meeting, I walked into the linen room to find Sarah holding a piece of black fabric that looked more like a cocktail napkin than a uniform. Sarah was 62 years old. She was a deaconess at her church and a grandmother of 4. She had cleaned the rooms of governors and jazz legends with dignity for 30 years. Now she was trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Look at this baby," she whispered, holding the garment up. "She wants us to wear this." I took the fabric from her hands. It was a flimsy polyester dress with a hemline that would barely cover the thigh and a neckline that plunged aggressively low. It looked like a cheap Halloween costume for a French maid, not the uniform of a housekeeper at a historic hotel. My blood boiled. This was not just a uniform change, it was a degradation. It was Ashley projecting her twisted fantasy of servitude onto women who deserved nothing but respect. I handed the dress back to Sarah and told her not to put it on. Then I marched straight to the lobby. I found Ashley and my mother standing near the front desk. Ashley was holding a tablet showing my mother mood boards, while my mother nodded enthusiastically, like she was looking at the blueprint for a palace, not the destruction of her own legacy. "Ashley," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty lobby, "we need to talk about these uniforms. You cannot seriously expect the housekeeping staff to wear these." Ashley looked up annoyed. "Oh my God. Claire, are you still here? What is wrong with them? They are Parisian chic. I saw them at a boutique hotel in Soho. It elevates the brand. It makes the service feel younger and sexier. Sexier, I repeated, incredulity rising in my throat. Sarah is 62. She has arthritis. She bends over to scrub bathtubs and change sheets. That dress is impractical, and frankly, it is insulting. These women are not props for your aesthetic. They are human beings. You are stripping them of their dignity. My mother stepped between us, her face tight. Claire, stop it. You are being dramatic again. Ashley is trying to modernize the guest experience. Just because you prefer everyone to look like they are going to a funeral does not mean the rest of us do. Mom, look at the dress, I insisted, holding up the photo I had snapped on my phone. It is offensive. If Dad saw this, he would flip. Your father loves the new direction, my mother lied, smooth as silk. And honestly, Claire, I think I know what this is really about. She crossed her arms and looked me up and down with a pitying expression. You are jealous. You are jealous because Ashley has a sense of style and flair that you never had. You have always been so rigid, so plain. Now that Ashley is bringing some beauty into this place, you cannot stand it. You cannot stand that she is the one making the Ellington shine while you are just standing in the shadow. So do us all a favor and go home. Let the girl do her job. I stared at my mother. She truly believed that. She believed that objecting to the exploitation of our elders was just petty jealousy. I looked at Ashley, who was smirking triumphantly. I realized then that there was no reasoning with them. Logic had left the building along with the old uniforms. Fine, I said quietly. Have it your way. I walked away, leaving them to their delusion, knowing that every short skirt and humiliated employee was just another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. The kitchen had always been the soul of the Ellington. For 40 years it smelled of slow roasted pork, smoked paprika, and the secret spice blend that my grandfather and Chef Otis had perfected together. But when I walked in that Tuesday, the air was thick with tension instead of aroma. Ashley was standing at the stainless steel pass holding a plate of our signature ribs like she was holding a dead rat. This is disgusting, she announced, dropping the plate into the trash bin. The sound of the ceramic crashing against the metal made the entire kitchen staff jump. It is just grease and bone. Who eats this? Otis stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron. His face was a mask of controlled anger. Those ribs are the reason we have been booked solid for 3 decades, Mrs. Williams. That is a James Beard award-winning recipe. People fly in from London just to eat that grease and bone. Ashley rolled her eyes. Well, they can fly somewhere else. We are pivoting, Otis. I want a plant-based menu. Deconstructed beet tartare. Kale foam. Things that look good on a plate, not a pile of messy meat. We are aiming for a Michelin star, not a backyard barbecue. Otis looked at Ryan, who was leaning against the walk-in freezer, scrolling on his phone. Ryan, tell your wife that 90% of our revenue comes from this menu. You cut the soul food, you cut the throat of this business. Ryan looked up, annoyed that he had to look away from his screen. Otis, watch your tone. Ashley is the creative director. If she says the ribs go, the ribs go. And honestly, she is right. The menu feels heavy. It feels old. We want a younger demographic, not the cholesterol club. Otis took off his chef hat and placed it gently on the counter. He looked at Ryan with a mixture of pity and disgust. You are throwing away your heritage, son. You are ashamed of who you are, and you are letting her erase it. That is it, Ryan snapped, straightening up. I have had enough of your insubordination. You are fired. Pack your things and get out. The kitchen went deadly silent. The sous chef stopped chopping. The dishwasher turned off the spray hose. Otis did not argue. He did not beg. He simply untied his apron, folded it neatly, and placed it next to his hat. He walked to his station and began placing his knives into his leather roll one by one. I stood by the door, unable to breathe. Firing Otis was not just a business mistake, it was a death sentence for the hotel culture. As Otis walked toward the exit, carrying the tools of his trade, he stopped in front of me. He looked at Ryan and Ashley, who were already discussing oat milk suppliers, and then he looked at me. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady as a rock. I am sorry, Claire, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I cannot watch them kill this place. I kept the fire burning as long as I could. I watched him walk out the back door into the alley. The kitchen felt colder instantly. I looked at the trash can where the signature ribs lay ruined among the garbage. Otis leaned close to me before he left and whispered the truth that I already knew deep down. This hotel is dead, child. They just do not know it yet. The transformation of the staff was immediate and disastrous. Gone were the seasoned professionals who wore their uniforms with pride and knew the difference between service and servitude. In their place, Ashley had hired what she called brand ambassadors. These were her friends from college or aspiring models she had met at parties. They were undeniably beautiful, young and stylish, but they had the work ethic of a sloth on vacation. The front desk looked less like a hotel concierge and more like a VIP section at a nightclub where the staff decided if you were cool enough to be acknowledged. I sat in the lobby nursing a coffee and watching the train wreck unfold. Mr. Henderson, a retired judge who had been staying at the Ellington for 15 years, walked up to the desk. He was a man of dignity who expected a certain level of decorum. He waited patiently for 2 minutes while the new receptionist, a girl named Kiki, finished typing a text message. When she finally looked up, she did not smile. She did not say, "Welcome back, Judge Henderson." She popped her gum and said, "Last name." I saw the judge stiffen. "Henderson," he said quietly. "I usually stay in suite 402. Kiki tapped a few keys with long acrylic nails. "Yeah, well, we don't hold specific rooms anymore. First come, first serve. You are in 205. It is by the elevator." "But I always stay in 402, the judge insisted. "It is quiet." Kiki rolled her eyes openly. "Look, sir, do you want the room or not? I have a line." There was no one behind him. Judge Henderson looked at her. Then he looked around the lobby, which had been stripped of its warmth and history. He left his keycard on the counter. "No," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I do not think I want the room. In fact, I do not think I will be coming back." I watched a $20,000 a year customer walk out the revolving doors forever. My heart ached, but I forced myself to remain seated. I was documenting everything. By the end of the week, the online reviews began to pour in like acid rain. 1 star. The staff was rude and dismissive. 1 star. My room was not ready at 4 p.m. 1 star. The soul of this place is gone. I took a stack of printed reviews into Ryan's office. He was sitting with his feet up on the desk, throwing a tennis ball against the wall that Ashley had just painted white. I dropped the papers on his chest. Read them. "Ryan," I said, "we have lost 3 corporate accounts and 5 VIP regulars in 4 days. The new staff is chasing people away." Ryan picked up a review, glanced at it, and laughed. He crumpled the paper and tossed it toward the trash can, missing it completely. "You worry too much, Claire. These complaints are from dinosaurs. Look at who wrote this. A 60-year-old man, a woman from Ohio. These are not our target demographic anymore. We want young, rich influencers. If these old people do not get the vibe, that is their problem, not ours. They just do not have the class to appreciate what we are doing." He picked up his tennis ball and threw it again, leaving the crumpled evidence of his failure lying on the floor. The numbers never lie, even when family does. I was sitting in my makeshift office at the local coffee shop, remotely accessing the hotel server which Ryan had foolishly forgotten to lock me out of. I was looking for the reason why the vendor payments were late, but instead I found a transaction that made my stomach drop. $78,000 paid to Portia of downtown Chicago. The description simply read, "Transportation asset." My blood ran cold. I knew we needed a new shuttle van for the airport runs, but a shuttle van costs $40,000, not nearly $80,000. I drove straight to the hotel. There it was, parked illegally in the fire lane right in front of the main entrance. A pearl-white Porsche Macan. It gleamed under the afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the peeling paint of the hotel facade that Ryan claimed we could not afford to fix. Ryan was standing next to it, wiping a smudge off the hood with his silk tie. I slammed my car door and marched over. Ryan, tell me you did not buy this with company funds, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Ryan looked up unbothered. Oh, hey Claire. Nice, right? We needed a vehicle that screams luxury. When I pick up investors or VIP guests, I cannot have them riding in that old Ford van. It smells like mildew. This says success. This says the Ellington is back. I looked at the compact SUV. Ryan, this is a compact luxury car. Where are you going to put the luggage? Where are you going to fit a family of 4? This is not a shuttle. This is a toy. You cut the housekeeping staff overtime pay last week. You told them we were in a cash crunch. And then you went and bought a Porsche. It is an investment in our brand image, Claire, he argued, adjusting his sunglasses. You have to spend money to make money. Besides, it is a tax write-off. Just then, the automatic doors opened and Ashley walked out. She was not dressed for a business meeting. She was wearing yoga pants and flip-flops, holding a green juice. Oh good, the car is ready, she said, walking past me like I was invisible. Babe, I am taking the shuttle. She made air quotes with her fingers to the salon. My nail tech had a cancellation and I need a refill. Ryan tossed her the keys without hesitation. Have fun, babe. Do not scratch the rims. I watched in disbelief as she hopped into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirror to check her lipstick, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving skid marks on the pavement. I looked at Ryan. So the VIP guest is your wife going to get a manicure? Ryan shrugged. She is the creative director. She needs to look the part. You are just being petty because you are still driving that Honda. I did not argue further. I did not scream about fiduciary duty or moral bankruptcy. I simply pulled out my phone. I took a photo of the tire marks. Then I logged into the bank app and took a screenshot of the transaction. Then I took a picture of Ryan standing there looking smug. This was not just bad management anymore. Using company funds for personal luxury vehicles while claiming financial hardship was fraud. It was embezzlement. I saved the photos to a hidden folder on my phone named Evidence. That was the first bullet in my chamber, and I was just getting started. Saturday morning arrived, and with it came the circus. Ashley had decided that the hotel legendary jazz brunch was too old-fashioned, so she canceled the live band and replaced them with a playlist of thumping house music that rattled the vintage window panes. She called the event the Rose Garden Experience, and instead of our loyal community members, the lobby was packed with influencers she had bribed with free champagne. The room was a sea of ring lights, tripods, and people taking selfies with food they had no intention of eating. I sat in a secluded corner near the kitchen door, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, observing the chaos. At 11 o'clock, the Turner family walked in. Dr. Turner was a pillar of the Bronzeville community and had delivered half the babies in the neighborhood, including Ryan. He and his wife were celebrating their 40th anniversary. They were seated at table 5, the prime spot by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. They looked elegant and happy, completely out of place amidst the chaos of crop tops and flash photography. They had just received their appetizers when Ashley marched into the room, flanked by 3 girls who looked like they were dressed for a music festival. Ashley scanned the room and frowned. She pointed a manicured finger at table 5. I saw her whisper something to the hostess, who shook her head nervously. Ashley rolled her eyes and stomped over to the Turner's table herself. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. I knew Ashley was entitled, but I prayed she would not be stupid enough to disrespect Dr. Turner. I was wrong. Excuse me, Ashley said, her voice shrill enough to cut through the bass of the music. We actually need this table. These ladies have over 1 million followers combined, and the lighting here is perfect for their content. Dr. Turner lowered his fork and looked at her over his spectacles. Young lady, we are in the middle of our anniversary meal. We made this reservation 2 months ago. Yeah, I know, Ashley replied, shifting her weight impatiently. But this is a private promotional event now. You guys do not really fit the vibe we are going for. It is a little awkward for the photos. I can move you to a table in the back near the kitchen, or you can take your food to go." The room went quiet. Even the DJ turned the music down. The disrespect was palpable. A white woman telling a respected black elder that he did not fit the vibe of the hotel his community built was a level of tone deafness that was almost impressive. Dr. Turner stood up slowly, placing his napkin on the table. He did not yell. He did not make a scene. He simply looked Ashley in the eye and said, "You have made yourself very clear. We will not trouble you again." He offered his arm to his wife, and they began to walk out with their heads held high. Ashley huffed and turned to her friends. "God, some people are so dramatic, right?" She laughed, flipping her hair. But she did not notice the girl at the table behind her. The girl was holding her phone up steady and focused. The red recording dot was flashing. Ashley thought she had just cleared a table for her friends, but she had actually just auditioned for the role of the year most hated woman on the internet. I took a sip of my tea and checked my watch. The video would be viral by lunch. By Sunday morning, the video had hit 2 million views. The hashtag boycott. The Ellington was trending locally on Twitter right below the weather forecast. I woke up to my phone vibrating continuously on the nightstand. I opened Instagram and there it was. Ashley's voice shrill and entitled, telling Dr. Turner to leave. The comments were a bloodbath. People were calling for a total boycott. They were canceling wedding reservations. They were dragging my family name through the mud, calling us sellouts who had forgotten where we came from. I drove to the hotel expecting to see a crisis management team. Instead, I found my family in a state of meltdown. Ryan was pacing around the office, sweating through his shirt. My mother was crying, holding her head. Ashley was sitting in the corner, scrolling through her phone, looking more annoyed than remorseful, blocking people in the comments section one by one. When I walked in, Ryan turned on me like a rabid dog. "This is your fault," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "I was not the one who kicked out a civil rights activist for a TikToker. I was sitting in the corner drinking tea." "You knew," Ryan yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. "You knew who Dr. Turner was. You should have intervened. You should have briefed Ashley on the VIP list. You let her walk into a trap because you wanted her to fail. You wanted to embarrass me. This is sabotage, Claire. You are jealous and you are vindictive." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to correct him, waiting for them to say that common decency does not require a briefing. But my father just looked up from his desk, his face gray with worry. "Claire, stop arguing and fix this," he ordered. "We have had 10 cancellations for next month in the last hour. We are bleeding revenue. You know the community leaders. You know how to talk to them. Write a statement. Call Dr. Turner. Fix it." I looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They had fired me, replaced me, and insulted me, but the moment their incompetence threatened their bank account, I was suddenly essential again. A part of me wanted to walk out and let the place burn to the ground. I wanted to watch the reputation score hit 0. But then I remembered the plan. I remembered the default clause. I was not just the sister. I was the lien holder. If the hotel lost its entire client base, the asset I was about to seize would be worthless. I needed to save the ship so I could eventually throw the captain overboard. "Fine," I said, opening my laptop. "I will draft a public apology. I will call the NAACP chapter president. I will smooth this over." I spent the next 6 hours doing the job Ryan was being paid to do. I ghost wrote a humble apology for Ashley to post. I personally called Dr. Turner and convinced him not to sue. I put out the fire while Ryan hid in his office playing video games to relieve his stress. I saved the brand that day, but as I hit send on the press release, I smiled. I was not saving them. I was just polishing my trophy before I took it home. Desperation has a very specific look. It looks like my brother Ryan sitting in his office at 2 in the morning staring at spreadsheets he barely understood, realizing that the Porsche payment was due and the hotel occupancy was at an all-time low. The boycott I had smoothed over stopped the public bleeding, but it did not bring the money back. The cash flow was dead. Ryan needed a miracle. And unfortunately, his wife provided one in the form of her brother Kyle. I knew Kyle from high school. He was the kind of guy who always had a business opportunity that could not fail, yet he was somehow always sleeping on a friend's couch. He walked into the hotel on Wednesday wearing a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was definitely fake. I watched the meeting from my laptop at home, having never returned my administrative access to the security cameras. Kyle did not come with a business plan. He came with buzzwords. He sat across from Ryan and Ashley and spun a tale about a new cryptocurrency platform called Vestra that used artificial intelligence to predict market surges. "Listen," Kyle said, leaning forward, his eyes wide with predatory excitement. "Traditional business is dead. You are grinding for pennies here. Vestra is seeing 300% returns weekly. You put in 200 grand today, you have nearly 1 million by next month. You could pay off the renovations, buy more cars, and look like a genius to your dad." I saw Ryan's eyes light up. He did not see a scam. He saw a shortcut. He saw a way to prove that he was smarter than me without actually doing any work. "But we do not have 200 grand liquid," Ryan said, deflating slightly. "The operating account is tapped out." Kyle smiled, the kind of smile a wolf gives a sheep. "You have equity, Ryan. This building is worth millions. You are sitting on a gold mine. Just leverage a tiny piece of it. A short-term bridge loan. You get the cash, dump it in crypto, double it, and pay back the loan before the bank even sends the first statement. It is literally free money." I held my breath watching the screen. The deed to the hotel was clear of debt because I had paid it off. But Ryan had the power of attorney as CEO. He could legally encumber the property, but he had to know it was suicide. Ryan looked at Ashley. She nodded encouragingly. "Do it, babe," she urged. "Imagine Claire's face when we make $1 million in a month." Ryan pulled a folder out of his desk. It was a loan application from a predatory lender, the kind with high interest rates and brutal terms. He did not call our family lawyer. He did not call our accountant. He simply picked up a pen. I watched in high definition as my brother signed his name on the dotted line, using the hotel as collateral for a gambling addiction disguised as an investment. He had just violated the negative pledge clause in my debt agreement. He had just handed me the smoking gun. He signed the paper, shook Kyle's hand, and leaned back, looking like a king. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. Ryan insisted on hosting my mother's 60th birthday at the most expensive steakhouse in the city. He rented out the private wine cellar, ordered magnums of vintage champagne, and acted like he was the Wolf of Wall Street instead of a man who had just secretly mortgaged the family legacy to a loan shark. I sat at the end of the long table watching him pour wine with a shaking hand. He was high on the adrenaline of fast cash. The loan money had hit the account that morning, and instead of investing it or paying bills, he was burning it to buy affection. When it was time for gifts, I stood up first. I had spent weeks researching the best geriatric care in the country. I handed my mother a thick cream envelope tied with a silk ribbon. She opened it, expecting a spa voucher or perhaps a check. Instead, she pulled out a brochure for the Cleveland Clinic Executive Health Program. "What is this?" she asked, holding it by the corner like it was a used tissue. "It is a comprehensive health audit, Mom," I explained, ignoring Ashley's snicker. "Full cardiac screening, genetic testing, and a 3-day stay in their VIP suite. You have been complaining about your heart palpitations, and this is the best preventative care money can buy." It cost me $5,000 from my personal savings account, but I wanted to ensure she would be around for another 20 years. My mother dropped the brochure onto the table next to a half-eaten bread roll. "Oh, how festive. Nothing says happy birthday like a colonoscopy. Thank you, Claire, for reminding me that I am old and decaying." She turned away from me, dismissing my gesture entirely. Then it was Ryan's turn. He stood up, grinning from ear to ear, and signaled for Ashley. She walked over carrying a bright orange box that every woman in the room recognized instantly. An Hermes Birkin, specifically a size 30 in gold Togo leather. Market price on the resale market was easily $25,000. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears actually sprang to her eyes. She untied the ribbon with trembling fingers and lifted the bag out like it was the Holy Grail. "Oh, Ryan," she sobbed, clutching the leather to her chest. "Oh, my beautiful boy. This is... this is too much. You should not have." "I wanted to spoil you, Mom," Ryan said, kissing her cheek. "You deserve the best. And now that business is booming, I want you to look like the matriarch you are." My father stood up and raised his glass. To Ryan, he toasted, his face beaming with pride. A son who knows how to treat his mother. A true provider. I looked at the bag. Then I looked at the brochure for the heart scan lying in the breadcrumbs. The irony was suffocating. My gift was paid for with honest, hard-earned money, meant to save her life. Ryan's gift was bought with stolen equity, meant to destroy her future. But as my mother paraded the bag around the table, showing it off to her friends, she did not care about the source. She hugged the bag tighter than she had ever hugged me. "Ryan is the most filial child I could ask for," she announced loud enough for the waiters to hear. "He is the only one who truly appreciates me." I took a sip of my water to wash down the bile in my throat. "Enjoy the bag, Mom," I thought. "It is going to be the most expensive accessory you ever own because it just cost you your hotel." The waitstaff began clearing the main course plates, replacing them with dessert menus, but the interrogation was just beginning. Aunt Sheila, who had never run a business in her life, but had an opinion on everything, leaned across the floral centerpiece. "So, Claire," she said loud enough for the entire table to hear, "I heard the news. It must be hard stepping down after all that work. Are you okay?" Before I could answer, my father cleared his throat. He sat up straighter, adjusting his suit jacket like he was about to address a shareholders' meeting. "Claire is fine, Sheila," he announced, his voice booming with unearned authority. "She is not stepping down exactly. Think of it as a correction." Claire was great at holding the fort during the crisis. But Ryan is the pillar. He is the architect of the future. Claire is just helping out in the background now. Support staff, really. Support staff. The words hit me like a physical slap. I was the one who negotiated the vendor contracts. I was the one who secured the liquor license. I was the one who saved the building from foreclosure 6 months ago. But to him, I was just the help. Ryan nodded, swirling his cognac, attempting to look statesmanlike. "Yeah, it was a lot of pressure for Claire. I'm just glad I can take the weight off her shoulders. I want her to relax." Ashley chimed in, peeling a grape with her manicured fingers. "Exactly. And honestly, at Claire's age, 34 is it? It is really hard to keep up with the hospitality trends. It is a young person's game now. It is probably better she takes a back seat. It is so hard for women to find new careers in their mid-30s anyway. You do not want to look desperate." The table laughed. A polite ripple of amusement at my expense. My mother patted my arm, but her eyes were cold. "Listen to your brother Claire. He is doing this for you. You should be grateful you do not have to worry about money anymore." I looked around the table at the smiling faces of my family. They were eating steak and drinking vintage wine paid for by a loan that violated every covenant of the mortgage I held. They were celebrating their own demise and mocking the only person who could save them. I felt the stem of my wine glass flex under my grip. I squeezed it so hard my knuckles turned white. I imagined shattering it right there, letting the red wine stain the white tablecloth like a crime scene. But I did not. I took a slow, deliberate sip. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them call me old. Let them call me support staff. Because when the gavel drops and I take everything they have, they will realize that the support staff owns the building. Just you wait. The envelope looked innocent enough, just a standard white rectangle mixed in with my utility bills and junk mail. But the return address was for a private equity firm I did not recognize, and it was addressed to the Ellington Heritage, LLC, care of Claire Williams. I frowned. I had resigned as the registered agent weeks ago, but clearly Ryan had been too busy test driving his Porsche to file the paperwork with the state. I tore it open standing in my kitchen, and as I read the first paragraph, the world seemed to stop spinning. It was a notice of default and intent to foreclose. But not from the bank I had paid off. This was from High Yield Capital Partners regarding a secured bridge loan of $200,000. My eyes scanned the document rapidly. The loan had been originated 30 days ago. The first payment was missed. The collateral listed was the hotel property. I sat down heavily on my kitchen stool. Ryan had not just borrowed money, he had borrowed money from sharks and then ghosted them. But where did the money go? $200,000 does not just vanish in a month, even with Ashley's spending habits. I remembered Kyle's visit, the cryptocurrency, Vestra. I opened my laptop and typed Vestra coin into the search bar. The results were a sea of red. Rug pull. Scam. Founders flee with millions. The value of the coin had plummeted to zero 3 days ago. I looked back at the default notice. Ryan had leveraged our family legacy to buy magic beans, and the beanstalk had just collapsed, crushing him underneath. A cold calm washed over me. This was it. This was the material breach David had told me to wait for. By taking out a second lien on the property without my consent, as the primary lien holder, Ryan had violated the negative pledge clause of the original mortgage deed. He had technically defaulted on my loan the moment he signed his name for their loan. I picked up the phone and called David. I did not even say hello. I got him, I said, my voice flat and hard. He took out a second mortgage, 200 grand, and he lost it all in a crypto scam. There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard the sound of papers rustling. Send me a picture of the notice, David said. If this is real, Claire, this is the nuclear option. You can accelerate the debt. You can take the building. But you know what this means, right? Once you pull this trigger, there is no going back. Your parents will never forgive you. I looked at the photo of me and my grandfather on the fridge. I thought about the beige walls, the fired staff, the Porsche, the humiliation. They did not forgive me for saving them the first time I thought. They punished me for it. Draft the papers, David, I said. I want everything ready for the gala. I hung up. I looked at the default notice one last time. It was not just a piece of paper, it was an eviction notice, and I was going to serve it in front of the entire city. I drove to my parents' house carrying a leather portfolio that contained the autopsy of our family business. My father was watching the news and my mother was arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Ryan was there too, eating a sandwich on the sofa like he bad not just gambled away our legacy. I turned off the television. We need to talk, I said, my voice slicing through the domestic tranquility. I laid the documents out on the coffee table one by one. The notice of default, the bank transfer to the fraudulent crypto exchange, the picture of the Porsche parked in the fire lane. Ryan stopped chewing. His eyes darted from the papers to my face, and I saw the panic set in. What is this, Claire? My father asked, reaching for his reading glasses. It is the end, Dad, I said, brutally honest. Ryan took out a secured loan against the hotel for $200,000 without my consent. He sent every penny of it to a scam cryptocurrency platform that collapsed 3 days ago. The money is gone. And because he missed the first payment, the lender is foreclosing. We are going to lose the building in 30 days. My mother dropped a rose on the floor. That is impossible, she whispered. Ryan told us profits were up. He bought me a Birkin bag. He bought that bag with stolen money, Mom, I snapped. He embezzled funds, he committed fraud, and now he has breached the mortgage contract I hold. Ryan stood up, his face turning red. It was not a scam, he shouted, his voice cracking. It was a high-risk investment. Kyle said the market would bounce back. I was trying to double our capital so we could open a second location. I was doing it for the family. You were doing it for your ego, I countered. You gambled the roof over our heads on a get-rich-quick scheme because you are too lazy to do the actual work. And now you have ruined us. I expected my father to yell. I expected him to grab Ryan by the collar. Instead, silence filled the room. Ryan looked at our parents and saw the disappointment forming in their eyes. He knew he had no defense, so he pulled the ripcord on his emergency parachute. Emotional manipulation. He threw himself onto the Persian rug, falling to his knees with a thud that shook the floorboards. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob, loud theatrical sobs that sounded more like a toddler having a tantrum than a grown man. "I am sorry," he wailed. The pressure was too much. "Everyone expects me to be perfect like Claire. I just wanted to make you proud, Dad. I wanted to be the hero. I am so stupid. Please do not hate me." I watched him with disgust. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. But to my horror, it worked. My mother rushed over to him, dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around his shaking shoulders. "Shh, shh, it is okay, baby," she cooed, stroking his hair. "We know you meant well. We know you tried." She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with accusation. "Look at what you have done, Claire. You have broken him. He made a mistake. He is young. Why do you have to be so cruel? Can you not see he is suffering enough without you waving papers in his face?" I stood there frozen. The evidence of his crime was right in front of them, but they were comforting the criminal and blaming the prosecutor. I realized then that there was no bottom to their delusion. Ryan could burn the hotel down with them inside and they would thank him for keeping them warm. My father finally set the papers down on the coffee table. He took off his reading glasses and folded them slowly with a deliberation that made the room feel suddenly very small. I straightened my spine, expecting him to finally unleash the discipline that Ryan had needed for 30 years. I expected him to tell Ryan to pack his bags. I expected justice. Instead, my father walked around the coffee table, stepping over Ryan's legs where he still knelt on the floor. He walked straight up to me. I saw his hand raise, but my brain refused to process what was happening until the sharp sting radiated across my left cheek. The sound of the slap was louder than Ryan's sobbing. It cut through the air and sucked the oxygen out of the room. My head snapped to the side and I tasted copper in my mouth. I stood there stunned, my hand hovering over my burning skin. I looked at my father. His face was not filled with regret. It was twisted with a self-righteous fury that I had never seen directed at anyone but strangers. "How dare you!" he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you bring this filth into my house and threaten your own brother with prison? Is this what I raised? A traitor. A sister who would sell out her own blood for a few pieces of paper." "Dad," I whispered, my voice trembling. "He stole $200,000. He committed fraud. I am not the one who did this. He did it because he was trying to help," my father roared, pointing at Ryan, who was now looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "He made a mistake, a business mistake, and instead of helping him fix it like a family member should, you are acting like the FBI. You are disgusting, Claire. You have always been cold, but I never thought you were vicious." My mother stood up from the floor, wiping Ryan's tears. "Your father is right, Claire," she chimed in, her voice icy. "You have plenty of money. You have your consulting fees. You have savings. If you really cared about this family, you would write a check and make this go away. Instead, you are trying to destroy your brother because you are bitter that we chose him. It is jealous and it is ugly." "You want me to pay for it?" I asked quietly, the realization settling over me like a funeral shroud. "You want me to use my personal money to cover up his crime?" "I want you to do your duty," my father spat. "You are the eldest. It is your job to protect him, not prosecute him. Fix this, Claire. Pay the debt. Get the lien removed. And do not ever speak of this again. If the police show up at this hotel, you are no daughter of mine." I looked at the three of them. The crying man-child, the enabling mother, the violent father. For 34 years I had tried to buy their love with obedience and excellence. I had thought that if I was just good enough, they would finally see me. But that slap woke me up. It severed the invisible cord that had tethered me to their approval. The pain in my cheek faded, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted me to fix it. They wanted me to handle the business. I slowly lowered my hand from my face. I looked my father in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel fear. I felt power, because I knew something they did not. I knew the law, and I knew exactly how this was going to end. "Okay," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You are right, Dad. Family protects family. I will take care of the debt. I will handle everything. My father exhaled, looking relieved that he had bullied me into submission. Good. I knew you would come to your senses. Now go home and fix this mess. I walked out of the house without another word. I sat in my car in the driveway and touched my cheek one last time. I was going to fix it all right. But I wasn't going to pay the debt. I was going to buy it. And when I was done, they wouldn't just be homeless. They would be obsolete. The daughter they knew was gone. The landlord had just arrived. I returned to the house the next morning, entering the lion's den with a white flag that was actually a Trojan horse. My father was sitting in his usual armchair reading the financial section of the newspaper as if he had not physically assaulted me 12 hours prior. Ryan was sprawled on the sofa nursing a hangover and scrolling through social media, likely deleting comments from angry former guests. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension, but I forced my face into a mask of defeated obedience. I have thought about it. I said, my voice quiet and steady. You are right, Dad. I cannot let Ryan go to prison. It would destroy the family reputation. I will take care of the bridge loan. My father lowered the paper and let out a long exhale of relief. He did not apologize. He did not thank me. He simply nodded, confirming his belief that I existed solely to clean up their messes. I knew you would come to your senses, Claire, he said. You are a good sister. It is just money after all. You can always earn more. I swallowed the rage that threatened to rise in my throat. Yes, I said. But if I liquidate my portfolio to cover this, we will have zero operating capital left. We need a massive injection of cash immediately, or the hotel will fail next month anyway. That is why I have a condition. Ryan looked up, suspicion narrowing his eyes. What condition? I need full operational control of the Centennial Gala, I stated firmly. No interference from Ashley. No input from you. I have a list of conservative investors coming, and they will not write checks for a party with neon lights and techno music. I need to run this event my way to secure the funding we need to pay me back. Ashley walked into the room at that moment holding a hideous neon pink table runner. Excuse me, she snapped. The gala is my project. I have already hired a DJ from Miami. Ryan looked at his wife, then at me. He looked at the mountain of paperwork on the desk that represented the planning required for the event. He was lazy and he was scared. Babe, listen to her, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Do you really want to spend the next week arguing with caterers and florists? Let Claire handle the grunt work. We can just show up, look hot on the red carpet, and take the credit for the fundraising. Ashley pouted, looking between us. Fine, she huffed, dropping the pink fabric on the floor. But I am not wearing a uniform. I want a spotlight entrance. You will get your spotlight, Ashley, I promised her, my voice dripping with hidden meaning. You will be the center of attention. My father nodded, satisfied. It is settled then. Claire pays the debt and runs the party. Ryan and Ashley represent the face of the company. Now let us have breakfast. We are a family again. I walked out of the house 20 minutes later with the mandate I needed. They thought I was their savior. They had no idea I was their executioner. I sat in my car and connected my phone to the Bluetooth, dialing a number I knew by heart. Otis picked up on the second ring. Hello. Otis, it is Claire. I said, my tone sharp and commanding. Stop enjoying your retirement. I need you. Claire. He grunted. Unless you are telling me that boy has been fired, I am not interested. Better, I said, starting the engine. I just got control of the gala. I need you to call Sarah Marcus and the entire old crew. Meet me at the warehouse in an hour. What are we doing, Claire? Otis asked, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. We are not just throwing a party, Otis, I said, looking at the hotel in the rearview mirror one last time. We are staging a coup. Tell the team to bring their uniforms. The real Ellington is coming back for one night only. And after that, everything changes. The planning meeting for the Centennial Gala took place in the main boardroom, but it felt more like a backstage pass to a bad rave. Ashley had covered the historic oak conference table with mood boards that were so bright they actually hurt my eyes. There were swatches of neon pink and electric lime green fabric. There were photos of laser light shows and fog machines. And right in the center was a picture of a heavy metal cover band called the Sledgehammers. Ashley stood at the head of the table holding a laser pointer. "Okay, guys, listen up," she said with the manic energy of someone who had consumed too much caffeine and not enough reality. "The theme is no longer a century of excellence. That is boring. That is dusty. The new theme is the Ellington Electric. We are not looking back. We are looking forward." She clicked the remote and a slide appeared showing the hotel lobby bathed in ultraviolet light. "I want to cover the chandeliers in neon tubing. We are going to replace the floral centerpieces with glow-in-the-dark sculptures. And the music, no more jazz. Jazz is for elevators. I have booked the Sledgehammers. They are this incredible rock fusion band. They are loud, they are aggressive, and they scream energy." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked at the photo of the band members who were covered in tattoos and wearing torn leather. "Babe, are you sure about the band?" he asked hesitantly. "The guest list is mostly potential investors and local politicians. Most of them are over 60. Do you think they will like heavy metal?" Ashley rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Ryan, stop thinking small. This is about disruption. We want to shock them. We want to show them that the Ellington is not your grandfather's hotel anymore. If we play safe, we are invisible. If we play loud, we are legendary." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing slightly, waiting for me to launch into a lecture about tradition and decorum. "So Claire, what do you think? Or is this too cutting edge for you?" I looked at the mood board. I imagined the terrified faces of the conservative bankers and the city council members as they were assaulted by strobe lights and guitar solos. I imagined the donors clutching their pearls and closing their checkbooks. It was not just a bad idea. It was a catastrophe. It was the final nail in the coffin that I needed them to build. I smiled, a wide, genuine smile that seemed to confuse Ashley. "Ashley," I said, leaning forward, "I have to admit, when you first started talking, I was skeptical. But looking at this vision, I get it now. You are absolutely right. The Ellington has been stuck in the past for too long. A jazz quartet is predictable. But this is a statement." Ryan's jaw dropped. "You really think so, Claire?" "Absolutely," I lied smoothly. "It is bold, it is daring. It tells the world that the new management is not afraid to break the rules. If you want to make a splash, you cannot dip your toe in. You have to do a cannonball. I think you should go with the neon. And definitely book the band. In fact, book the most expensive lighting package they have. Make sure they can hear the music 3 blocks away." Ashley beamed, preening under the validation. "See, Ryan, even Claire gets it. It is going to be epic." I watched them high-five each other, celebrating their brilliance. I pulled the contract for the band toward me and signed off on the deposit, using the remaining scraps of the operating budget. Go ahead, I thought. Turn the lights up. Turn the music up. Make it as loud as possible. I want everyone to witness the crash. The days leading up to the gala were a masterclass in delusion. While I was coordinating with the kitchen staff to ensure the menu was perfect, and managing the lighting crews that Ashley had overpaid, my brother was busy measuring himself for a tuxedo. He had decided that a standard black tie was not good enough for a CEO of his caliber, so he commissioned a custom velvet dinner jacket in a deep midnight blue. He spent hours in front of the mirror, practicing his winning smile, and exactly 0 hours looking at the company financials. I walked into his office 3 days before the event holding a leather binder. "Ryan," I said, placing it on his desk, "I took the liberty of drafting your keynote speech. It touches on the history of the Hotel Honor's grandfather's legacy and outlines a vague but optimistic future. You need to memorize this. There are going to be potential investors in the room, and they want stability, not improv." Ryan looked at the binder like it was a contagious disease. He laughed, waving his hand dismissively. Claire, relax. I do not need a script. I am a natural. People do not want to hear some stiff corporate speech. They want passion. They want to hear from the visionary. I am just going to go up there and speak from the heart. I am going to wing it. I stared at him. You are going to wing a speech at the most important fundraising event in our history. Ryan, you have not read a balance sheet in months. What are you going to talk about? I am going to talk about growth, Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. I am going to tell them about the massive capital injection we are about to receive. I am going to tell them that the Ellington is going global. I felt a chill run down my spine. He was actually going to stand on stage and lie about money he did not have. He was going to commit securities fraud in front of a live audience. Okay, Ryan, I said, picking up the binder. It is your show. Break a leg. I walked out of his office and went straight to the server room. If Ryan wanted to perform for an audience, I was going to make sure he had the right one. I logged into the event management software and pulled up the guest list. Ashley had filled it with her friends' local socialites and a few C-list celebrities she hoped would post about the party. It was a list of people who could not help us financially, but would certainly enjoy the free champagne. I cracked my knuckles and began to edit. Select all. Delete. I opened my private database. I started adding names. First, I added Mr. Sterling, the loan officer from the high-interest capital firm that held the defaulted note. Then I added the regional director of the IRS, who I knew was investigating the hotel for payroll tax irregularities that Ryan had ignored. I added the health inspector, who had flagged the kitchen violations caused by the new staff. I invited every single creditor, vendor, and regulatory body that Ryan had stiffed or ignored in the last 6 months. I hit send on the digital invitations, marking them as VIP access. Ryan thought he was going to be speaking to a room full of admirers. He had no idea that I had just turned the ballroom into a courtroom. When he walked onto that stage, he would be staring directly into the eyes of the people coming to repossess his life. The warehouse on the south side of the city was dusty and smelled faintly of old timber, but to me it looked like a war room. When I walked in, 50 faces turned to look at me. It was the heart and soul of the Ellington. Otis was sharpening his knives on a whetstone. Sarah was organizing her housekeeping team. Marcus, the head concierge, who had a memory like a steel trap, was checking his watch. They had all been fired or marginalized by Ryan and Ashley, but they had shown up for me. I stood on a crate so they could all see me. I did not waste time with motivational speeches. I pulled a stack of crisp, white envelopes from my bag. Inside each one was an employment contract. I am not asking you to come back and work for the Ellington, I announced, my voice echoing off the metal rafters. Because as of right now, the Ellington is a sinking ship. I am asking you to work for me, my new company, Phoenix Hospitality Group. I am offering you 20% above your old salaries, full benefits, and a signing bonus. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah stepped forward, clutching her envelope. But Claire, she asked, confusion furrowing her brow. If we are working for you, why are we going back to the hotel? Ryan will just fire us again. I smiled. No, he won't. Because for the next 48 hours, you are undercover agents. You are going to go back in there and you are going to execute the most flawless service this city has ever seen. You are going to let Ashley scream at you about napkins. You are going to let Ryan boss you around. You are going to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. But you do not answer to them. You answer to me. And when the clock strikes midnight at the gala, we are taking the building back. Otis looked at the contract, then at me. He uncapped his pen and signed with a flourish. I am in, he rumbled. Let us cook. One by one they signed. It was a beautiful mutiny. When we returned to the hotel, the shift in the atmosphere was palpable. The staff moved with a new purpose. They were not downtrodden employees anymore. They were stakeholders in a revolution. Ryan noticed the difference, but being Ryan, he completely misinterpreted it. He strutted through the lobby, watching Marcus polish the brass luggage carts with renewed vigor. He saw Sarah organizing the linen closet with military precision. He walked into the office where I was working and smirked. "See Claire?" He gloated, leaning against the doorframe. "I told you I just needed to be firm with them. Look at them hustle. They finally respect me. They know who the boss is now." He gestured to Marcus, who was standing by the door. "Marcus, get me a double espresso and make it snappy." "Yes, Mr. Williams." Marcus replied, his face a mask of professional polite indifference. He turned to leave, but before he did, he caught my eye and gave the slightest wink. Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "I have got them eating out of the palm of my hand." He walked away, adjusting his velvet jacket, feeling like a king. He did not notice the way the staff looked at his back. It was not fear, it was not respect. It was the kind of deep pity you feel for a turkey the day before Thanksgiving. They knew exactly when the axe was coming down, and they were just waiting to set the table. The kitchen was a war zone, but not the kind where battles are won. It was the kind where logic went to die. It was 24 hours before the doors were set to open for the Centennial Gala, and Ashley was currently screaming at a 20-year-old line cook named Kevin. Kevin had been hired 3 days ago because he had a nice smile, but right now he looked ready to cry. Ashley was holding a tray of cucumber rolls and shaking it violently. "I said vegan sushi!" She shrieked, her voice bouncing off the stainless steel appliances. "This is just vegetables wrapped in rice. I want it to look like tuna. I want it to bleed like tuna, but with beet juice. Why is this so hard to understand?" I leaned against the doorframe of the service entrance, holding a steaming cup of black coffee. The kitchen was a disaster. There were wilted flowers on the counters where Ashley had decided to arrange centerpieces next to the raw food. There were boxes of frozen hors d'oeuvres melting on the floor because the walk-in freezer door had been left open. The head chef Ashley had hired a man whose resume listed private yacht experience, but who I suspected had only ever cooked instant noodles, was currently hiding in the pantry. Ryan was nowhere to be found. He had claimed he needed to go pick up his custom tuxedo, but I knew he was actually at the driving range trying to ignore the mounting panic in his chest. So it was just Ashley running the show, and she was running it straight into the ground. "Mrs. Williams," Kevin stammered, his hands shaking. "We do not have any beet juice, and the rice is overcooked because the steamer is broken. We cannot serve this." "Then fix it!" Ashley yelled, throwing the tray onto the counter. Rice and cucumber scattered everywhere. "Go to the store. Buy beets." "I do not care. I promised the influencers a sustainable, ocean-free seafood experience, and I am not going to look like a liar because you are incompetent." She spun around and saw a waiter carrying a stack of plates. "And you?" she pointed. "Why are those napkins folded like swans?" "Swans are tacky. I want them folded like lotus flowers. Do it again." The waiter looked at the 500 napkins he had just spent 4 hours folding. He looked at Ashley. Then he looked at the exit sign. I watched him weigh his options. He dropped the napkins on the floor right there in the middle of the kitchen. "I quit," he said simply, and walked out the back door. Ashley gasped. "You cannot quit." "You are fired!" she screamed at his retreating back. She turned to the rest of the staff, her eyes wild. "Anyone else want to leave?" "Huh. Good. Now get to work." She stormed out of the kitchen, pulling her phone out to call Ryan, probably to complain that the help was being difficult. I did not say a word. I did not step in to offer a solution. I did not call Otis to come save the day. Not yet. I walked up to the mezzanine balcony that overlooked the lobby. From there I could see the chaotic preparations below. The florists were arguing about payment. The lighting crew was setting up rigs that looked dangerously unstable. It was a symphony of failure. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was the best cup I had ever tasted. Let the rice be overcooked. Let the napkins be on the floor. Let Ashley scream until her voice gave out. They were digging their own grave, and I was just up here enjoying the view. The real show had not even started yet. The night before the gala, my parents were not looking at balance sheets or worrying about the foreclosure notice that was currently sitting in my safe. They were standing in front of a 3-way mirror in the master bedroom of their home, acting like royalty, preparing for a coronation. My father was adjusting the cummerbund of a tuxedo that cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and my mother was holding up a diamond necklace that I knew for a fact she had put on a credit card that was nearly maxed out. I stood in the doorway holding a clipboard with the final vendor schedules. They did not even notice me at first. They were too busy admiring their own reflections and the illusion of success that Ryan had sold them. "Look at us, Margaret," my father said, puffing out his chest. "We look like the owners of a global hospitality empire. Tomorrow night is going to be the beginning of a new era. When Ryan secures those investors, we are going to expand. Maybe Miami. Maybe New York. The Ellington name will be everywhere." My mother clasped the necklace around her neck, the diamonds sparkling under the chandelier light. "It is all thanks to Ryan," she sighed happily. "I always knew he had it in him. He just needed the chance to shine. He has such vision, unlike Claire." I tightened my grip on the clipboard. I had just spent 12 hours negotiating with the florist to release the centerpieces because Ryan's check had bounced. I had personally paid the deposit to ensure the event actually happened, but in this room, I was just the invisible mechanic keeping their fantasy vehicle running. Claire is a hard worker, my father conceded, inspecting his cufflinks. But she lacks the spark. She is too cautious, too focused on the small numbers. Ryan thinks big. That is what a CEO does. He takes risks. Risks, I thought. Like gambling the entire property on a crypto scam. Like embezzling funds for a Porsche. That kind of risk. My mother turned to look at me in the mirror, her expression shifting from pride to critical assessment. "Oh, Claire, you are still here. Did you pick up my dress from the alterations?" "Yes, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "It is hanging in the closet. And I confirmed the limousine for 6 p.m. tomorrow." "Good," she said, turning back to her reflection. "You know, once this gala is over and the money starts rolling in, we really need to have a talk about your future." "My future?" I asked. "Yes. You are 34. You are not getting any younger. And frankly, having you hovering around the hotel looking miserable is not good for the brand image. It undermines Ryan's authority." My father nodded in agreement. "Your mother is right. You need a life of your own, Claire. You need to stop clinging to the business." I watched them. Two people standing on the edge of a cliff, convinced they were about to fly. They were so arrogant, so dismissively cruel, that I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. My mother smoothed her silk gown and delivered the final blow with a casual smile. "After this deal closes and we are flush with cash, we should really look into matchmaking services for you. We need to find you a husband, Claire. Someone to take you off our hands so you can finally leave us alone and let Ryan run the empire in peace. Get you married and get you out of the way for good." 30 minutes before the doors opened, the grand ballroom did not look like a celebration of history. It looked like a nightclub had vomited onto a museum. The neon tubes that Ashley had insisted upon were humming with an aggressive purple light that made the crystal chandeliers look cheap. The sound check for the heavy metal band was shaking the floorboards, causing the antique sconces to rattle ominously against the plaster. I walked through the service corridor, checking the final preparations. My phone buzzed with a text from the security team at the front gate. The VIPs were arriving early. Mr. Sterling from the predatory lending firm was here. The IRS auditors were parking their sedans. The health inspector was already taking notes on the cleanliness of the lobby carpet. I went to the private dressing room reserved for the CEO. I did not knock. I pushed the door open to find Ryan sitting on a velvet ottoman, staring blankly at his reflection. His custom midnight blue tuxedo was crumpled, and there was a half-empty bottle of Macallan on the vanity table. He looked up at me with glassy eyes. The arrogance of the past few weeks had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified child playing dress-up. "I cannot do this, Claire," he slurred slightly, reaching for the glass. "I do not have the speech memorized. And I think the investors are going to ask about the quarterly projections. I do not know the numbers." I looked at him with zero sympathy. "You wanted to be the face of the company, Ryan. This is what the face does. You go out there, you smile, and you sell the dream. Fix your tie. You are on in 20 minutes. I left him drowning in his own anxiety and walked out to the main foyer. Ashley was there, but she was not greeting the guests. She was standing in the center of the red carpet holding a portable ring light live streaming to her 3,000 followers. She was completely oblivious to the arrival of Senator Davis, who was standing awkwardly behind her, waiting to be acknowledged. Hey guys, we are literally moments away from the biggest night of the year. Ashley chirped into her phone, turning her back on the senator. The vibe is insane. Make sure you drop a fire emoji in the chat if you love the decor. I watched Senator Davis shake his head and walk toward the bar looking for anyone who resembled a professional adult. The guests were mingling, but the atmosphere was confused. They were shouting over the sound of electric guitars warming up. They were squinting in the harsh neon lighting. They were looking for leadership and finding none. It was time. I stepped out of the shadows. I was not wearing a ball gown. I was wearing a white, bespoke tuxedo suit, tailored to lethal perfection. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and my lips were painted a shade of red that meant war. I walked through the crowd, and the air seemed to shift. I did not stop to chat. I walked with the stride of a woman who owned the pavement beneath her feet. I caught the eye of the sound technician in the booth, a man I had hired personally for this exact moment. I raised my hand and gave a sharp, subtle nod. Cut the music. It is showtime. The double doors swung open and the Centennial Gala began. Not with a bang, but with a screech of feedback that made 200 guests cover their ears simultaneously. The sledgehammers launched into their set immediately. It was deafening. The bass vibrated the floor so violently that the champagne flutes on the trays were rattling. The lighting, which Ashley had promised would be edgy, was simply blinding. Strobing purple and green lasers cut through the room, making it impossible to see the person standing next to you, let alone have a conversation about investment capital. I stood by the bar sipping sparkling water, watching the horror on the faces of Chicago's elite. These were people used to string quartets and polite conversation. Now they were trapped in a neon nightmare that smelled faintly of burning electronics and desperation. I watched as a waiter offered a tray of the deconstructed vegan sushi to Mr. Sterling, the loan officer holding our default notice. He took a bite of the beet-stained rice, frowned, and immediately spit it into a napkin. It was inedible. The lack of real food and the abundance of cheap alcohol was a recipe for disaster, but not the kind Ryan was hoping for. The breaking point happened near the ice sculpture, which was melting rapidly under the hot stage lights. Mrs. Davis, the wife of the senator and a woman who controlled half the charity budget in the city, made a polite comment to a server about the music being physically painful. Ashley heard her. Instead of apologizing or offering a quiet corner, Ashley stormed over to the 60-year-old matriarch and got in her face. "This is an immersive experience," Ashley shouted over the guitar solo, her voice shrill and aggressive. "If it is too loud for you, maybe you are just too old for the brand. We are curating a vibe here, and you are ruining it with your negative energy." The entire section of the room went still. Mrs. Davis turned a shade of purple that clashed with the neon lights. She grabbed her husband's arm and began to march toward the exit. Other guests, seeing the disrespect, began to follow suit. The exodus had begun. The room was spiraling. Guests were checking their watches. The creditors were exchanging knowing looks. The health inspector was taking photos of the melting food. It was a perfect storm of incompetence. And then the spotlight shifted. The music died down slightly, not because the band stopped, but because the microphone was tapped aggressively. Ryan stood center stage. He was swaying. His midnight blue velvet jacket was stained with something dark, and his tie was crooked. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and the microphone in the other. He squinted into the blinding lights, trying to find the adoring crowd he had hallucinated in his mind. He looked like a captain standing on the deck of the Titanic demanding a round of applause for the iceberg. Ryan leaned into the microphone, his breath amplified so clearly that the front row could probably smell the whiskey. He did not welcome the guests. He did not thank the staff. He pointed a shaky finger at the crystal chandelier above him. "You know," he started, his voice booming and slurring simultaneously. "I hate that thing. It is so old. It reminds me of everything wrong with this place. Dusty, heavy, boring. A collective gasp rippled through the room. That chandelier was a custom piece from 1925, a symbol of Black excellence in an era of segregation. Ryan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and continued oblivious to the sacrilege he was committing. My grandfather was a great man, sure. But let us be honest, he was thinking small. He was thinking about community and service. I am thinking about domination. I am thinking about luxury. He took a large gulp of his drink and stumbled slightly, catching himself on the podium. People ask me, Ryan, how do you handle the pressure? How do you lead a multi-million-dollar empire? And I tell them it is all about the image. You have to look the part. You have to spend money to show people you have money. He laughed a wet, ugly sound. Like my car. Has anyone seen the Porsche Macan parked out front? The white one. That is my baby. My sister Claire told me we could not afford it. She said we needed to pay the vendors. He made a mocking face, mimicking a nagging woman. Pay the vendors, pay the electric bill, blah blah blah. But I bought it anyway. Because I am the CEO. And the CEO does not drive a Honda. I drive a Porsche because I earned it. Even if the bank account says 0, I am still a winner. I looked at table 1 where my parents were sitting. The blood had drained completely from their faces. My father was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. He was watching his son openly confess to embezzlement and financial irresponsibility in front of the very investors they needed to impress. My mother looked like she was going to faint. She looked around the room hoping to find a friendly face, but all she saw were the horrified expressions of the city elite and the cold, calculating stares of the creditors I had invited. Ryan raised his glass for a toast, spilling amber liquid onto his velvet jacket. So here is to the new Ellington, he shouted. Out with the old, out with the jazz, out with the boring history, and here is to me, Ryan Williams, the man who is going to change everything. He threw his head back to drink, but before the glass touched his lips, the room plunged into darkness. The aggressive neon lights cut out instantly. The heavy metal feedback died. The only light in the room came from the massive LED screen behind the stage, which had gone pitch black. Ryan blinked, confused, lowering his glass. "Hey!" he yelled into the dead microphone. "Who turned out the lights?" Then a single crisp sound cut through the silence. A digital chime. On the massive screen, a logo animated slowly in high definition. It was not the crest of the Ellington. It was a golden bird rising from ashes. Below it, in elegant, sharp font, appeared 3 words that made my father stop breathing. Phoenix Hospitality Group. My father was the first to break the silence. He lunged toward the stage, his face a mask of purple rage, his bow tie askew. "You told me I needed a life of my own. Well, this is it." I signaled to the security team. "Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Williams and Ashley off the property. They are trespassing." Ashley, who had been frozen in shock, finally found her voice. "You cannot fire me!" she shrieked, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "I am the creative director, and where are my keys? I am taking the Porsche." I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that cut through the tension. "The Porsche was purchased with embezzled company funds, Ashley. It is a company asset, which means it is my asset. You can call an Uber, or you can walk. And do not forget to stop by HR on Monday to sign your termination papers. You are fired." The security guards, the ones I had hired personally, stepped forward, blocking their path. My father looked at me one last time with pure hatred before turning away, dragging my weeping mother with him. Ashley huffed, trying to salvage her dignity, as she was marched toward the revolving doors. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, avoiding eye contact with the fallen dynasty. When the doors swung shut behind them, I turned back to the room. The silence was thick and awkward. The party was dead on arrival. But I had prepared for this. "Otis," I said into the microphone, my tone shifting from executioner to host. "It is time." The kitchen doors burst open, but it was not Ashley's terrified teenagers. It was Otis in his starch-white chef coat leading my old team. Sarah Marcus and 20 veteran servers flooded the room. They were not carrying vegan sushi. They were carrying silver trays piled high with the signature ribs, shrimp cocktail, and warm bread. The smell of real food, the soul of the Ellington wafted through the air, instantly overpowering the smell of ozone and cheap hairspray. At the same time, the curtain behind the stage rose. The rock band was gone. In their place sat a jazz quartet. The bassist plucked a low, resonant note that vibrated in the chest, not the ears. Marcus walked up to Mr. Sterling, who was still holding the debt notice. Marcus placed a glass of vintage single malt whiskey on the table with a knowing smile. "Compliments of the new owners, sir. We apologize for the earlier disturbance." Mr. Sterling looked at the whiskey, then up at me. He raised the glass in a silent toast. The tension in the room broke. Guests began to smile. The music swelled. I walked down the stairs of the stage, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as the queen taking her throne. The era of neon and noise was over. The Ellington was back. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of realization. My father pushed past a stunned waiter and marched toward the edge of the stage. His face was a map of disbelief. "You bought the debt," he stammered. "What does that mean, Claire? You cannot just take the hotel. We have rights. We have a grace period." I walked down the steps, the heels of my white suit clicking rhythmically against the wood. I held the microphone loosely, but my voice remained amplified, commanding the room. "Actually, Dad, you do not." When Ryan signed that loan agreement with high-yield capital, he violated the negative pledge clause of the original mortgage deed. That clause specifically forbids encumbering the property with junior debt without the senior lender's consent. I stopped a few feet away from him, towering over him in my stilettos. Since I was the guarantor of the original note, and now the holder of the secondary note, his signature triggered an automatic cross-default. It is called an acceleration clause. It means the entire balance of both loans is due immediately. Not in 30 days, not tomorrow, now. Ryan, who had pulled away from the security guard, stumbled forward. But I did not know he whined. I thought I was just leveraging the equity. Kyle said it was standard. I looked at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had struck me. I looked at his eyes, begging for mercy he had never shown me. I pulled my arm away slowly, dusting off the sleeve of my jacket as if he had soiled it. I looked him dead in the eye. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This has nothing to do with family," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "This is business, Dad." The sound of heavy boots hitting the parquet floor echoed through the silent ballroom. The guests parted instinctively, creating a wide corridor leading straight to the stage. 4 people walked in. 2 were uniformed officers and 2 were detectives in cheap suits. I took a sip of my sparkling water, watching the final act of my play unfold exactly as I had written it. I had not just invited the creditors. I had sent a comprehensive dossier to the Economic Crimes Unit 3 days ago. Detective Miller walked straight up to Ryan. My brother was still holding his arm where I had grabbed him, looking like a child who had been scolded. He saw the badges and his face went from red to a ghostly shade of gray. "Ryan Williams," the detective asked, his voice carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. Ryan nodded, unable to speak. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and obtaining credit under false pretenses," the detective recited. "We have evidence that you knowingly falsified financial statements to secure a loan from high-yield capital and subsequently diverted those funds to an unregulated offshore cryptocurrency exchange." My mother let out a scream that sounded like an animal in a trap. She lunged forward, grabbing the detective's sleeve. "No, you cannot take him. He is a good boy. It was an investment. He did not mean to steal. It was just a mistake." The detective gently but firmly peeled her fingers off his jacket. "Ma'am, this is not a mistake. It is a felony." He gestured to the uniformed officer who spun Ryan around. The click of the handcuffs locking into place was the loudest sound in the room. Ryan looked at me, his eyes wide with terror, but I did not look away. I did not blink. Ashley, who had been standing near the edge of the stage, clutching her clutch bag like a shield, saw the handcuffs and made a run for it. She turned on her heel and began to speed walk toward the side exit, her head down, hoping to blend into the shadows. Ms. Williams, the second detective, called out calmly, "Do not leave." Ashley froze. She turned around, a fake smile plastered on her face. "I am just going to call my lawyer. This has nothing to do with me. I am just the creative director. I do not handle the finances. Actually, you do," the detective said, walking over to her. "We have the dealership records. A Porsche Macan purchased with a company check, but titled in your personal name. That is embezzlement and grand larceny. You are coming with us too." Ashley's facade shattered instantly. The cool influencer persona vanished, replaced by a desperate cornered rat. She looked at the handcuffs the officer was holding, and then she looked at Ryan, who was being led down the stairs. "No," she screamed, backing away. "I did not know. He told me it was a company car. He told me he had the money. I am a victim here." She pointed a manicured finger at her husband. "He lied to me. He told me he was a genius. He told me we were rich. I did not steal anything. He bought it for me. Arrest him. He is the criminal. He is the fraud." Ryan stopped walking. He looked at his wife, the woman he had embezzled $200,000 to impress, the woman he had fired loyal staff for. He looked at her with a mixture of confusion and heartbreak. "Babe," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Do not call me babe, you loser," Ashley shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrist. "You ruined my life. I hate you." I watched as they were both led out the front door, the flashing lights of the police cruisers visible through the lobby windows. The guests watched in stunned silence. I turned to the band and raised my hand. "Play something upbeat," I ordered. "The trash has been taken out." The revolving doors settled to a stop, leaving a vacuum of silence in the ballroom. The police were gone, and with them the noise. Now only the stench of failure remained. I turned my attention to the floor. Scattered across the room were Ashley's hand-picked staff. They were standing in clusters, holding trays of melting ice and checking their phones, looking bored and confused. They were not servers. They were props in a play that had just been canceled. I walked to the center of the room and clapped my hands once. The sound was sharp, like a pistol crack. "Listen up," I commanded, my voice projecting without the microphone. "If you were hired by Ashley Williams in the last 3 months, put down your trays." They looked at each other. One girl, wearing a crop top that violated 3 different health codes, rolled her eyes. "Does this mean we are not getting paid?" she asked, snapping her gum. "It means you are trespassing," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "Leave your badges on the table. You have exactly 2 minutes to exit the building before I have security remove you, just like your boss. Go." It was a stampede. They dropped trays on tables and floors, not caring about the mess, scuttling toward the exits like cockroaches when the lights turn on. The room was suddenly empty of staff, but full of debris. The guests looked around uneasy, wondering if they should leave too. The air was thick with uncertainty. I pressed the talk button on my earpiece. Now. The double doors to the service corridor swung open. This time it was not a trickle. It was a flood. Otis marched in front, wearing his starch-white chef coat like general's armor. Behind him came Sarah Marcus and 50 experienced staff members I had rehired that morning. They moved with a synchronized efficiency that was beautiful to watch. They did not walk, they glided. In seconds, the tables were swarmed. The wilted flowers and neon plastic decorations were swept away, replaced by crisp white linens and fresh roses within moments. The trays of inedible vegan experiments vanished. In their place appeared silver platters steaming with the hotel's classics: mini beef Wellingtons, truffle arancini, the famous ribs de boned and elegant served on porcelain. "Hit it," I signaled to the stage. The heavy metal drum kit had been dismantled in record time. The jazz quartet I had kept on standby stepped forward. The drummer counted off a soft rhythm, and the pianist slid into a smooth, sophisticated melody that instantly warmed the room. The harsh overhead lights dimmed, replaced by the golden glow of the vintage sconces. The transformation took less than 15 minutes. It was a magic trick performed by professionals. I saw Senator Davis pick up a rib, take a bite, and close his eyes in pure bliss. He turned to his wife and nodded vigorously. Mr. Sterling, the loan officer, took a sip of the vintage wine Marcus had just poured him and smiled. Then it started. A single clap from the back of the room. Then another. Then a roar. The entire room of skeptical investors and angry VIPs erupted into applause. It was not polite applause. It was the ovation of a crowd that had been starving and had finally been fed. The Ellington was not dead. It had just been sleeping, and I had just woke it up. The sun rose over the Williams estate, but it brought no warmth. Inside the sprawling mansion, the silence was deafening. There were no servants making coffee, no sound of the gardener blowing leaves. The staff had quit weeks ago when the checks started bouncing, a fact my parents had conveniently ignored while Ryan promised them the world. Now they sat at the long mahogany kitchen table, two monarchs without a kingdom, staring at the terrifying reality of their own making. My father was reading the document taped to their front door. It was a writ of possession. It turned out that Ryan's ambition had no boundaries. In his desperation to cover his losses on the crypto exchange, he had not just leveraged the hotel. He had used his power of attorney to cross-collateralize the family home. He had forged my father's signature on the deed of trust, or perhaps my father had signed it blindly trusting his golden boy. It did not matter now. The result was the same. The house was gone. My mother sat in her silk robe looking at the empty refrigerator. She had always prided herself on being the perfect hostess, but now there was no food and no money to buy it. The joint bank accounts were empty, drained by Ryan to pay for his image, his Porsche, and his lies. "He is in jail, Robert," my mother whispered, her voice hollow. "Our son is in a cell, and we are being evicted." How did this happen? We were the Williams family. People respected us. My father crumpled the eviction notice in his fist. "We were fools, Margaret. We let him play CEO because it made us feel good. We ignored Claire. We pushed her away. And now she owns the empire, and we are sitting in a house that belongs to the bank. We have 72 hours to vacate," my mother said, tears finally spilling over. "Where do we go? The club membership is suspended. Our friends were at the gala. They saw everything. No one will take us in. We are pariahs." My father stared at the wall, his pride fighting a losing battle with his survival instinct. He looked old. The arrogance that had fueled him for decades had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened, frail man. He looked at the phone sitting on the table. It was the only lifeline they had left. "Call her," he said quietly. My mother looked at him. "She will humiliate us. After what you said to her, after the slap, call her. Call," my father yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "Do you want to sleep under a bridge? She is the only one with resources. She is the only one who won." I was sitting in the CEO office at the Ellington drinking a cup of coffee and watching the morning news reports about Ryan's arrest when my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted them to feel the weight of the wait. Finally, I slid my finger across the screen. "Hello?" I said, my voice cool and detached. "Claire," my mother sobbed immediately. "It is Mom. Please do not hang up. We are in trouble. They are taking the house. Ryan bet the house too. We have nowhere to go. Please, Claire, we are your parents. Help us." I waited for them in the executive suite. I did not meet them at the house. I did not go to a neutral coffee shop. I made them come to me. I made them walk through the lobby of the hotel they had lost, past the staff they had ignored, and take the elevator up to the office where my father had ruled with an iron fist for 40 years. Now I sat in his chair. It was reupholstered in cream leather, and the room smelled of fresh lilies, not stale cigar smoke. When the secretary ushered them in, I almost didn't recognize them. In 24 hours, they had aged 10 years. My mother was wearing a trench coat over yesterday's clothes, her eyes swollen and red. My father, who never left the bedroom without a tie, was wearing a polo shirt with a stain on the collar. They looked like refugees from a life they had destroyed. Claire. My mother cried out, stepping forward with her arms open, ready to enact a tearful reunion. Thank God. It has been a nightmare. The bank gave us until Friday. We have nowhere to go. I did not stand up. I did not smile. I simply raised a hand, stopping her in her tracks. Sit down, I said, pointing to the two low chairs in front of the desk. They hesitated, then sat. The power dynamic had shifted so violently it made the air thin. My father looked around the room, avoiding my gaze. You have changed the curtains, he muttered, a weak attempt to assert some familiarity. I ignored him. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I slid it across the polished wood until it rested on the edge right in front of them. Inside this envelope is $50,000 in cash. I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. It is enough to rent a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs for 1 year and cover your basic utilities and groceries. It is not enough for country club fees. It is not enough for designer clothes. And it is certainly not enough to hire a lawyer for Ryan. My father looked at the envelope with a mixture of greed and shame. He reached for it, but his hand shook. 50,000, he scoffed, trying to summon his old arrogance. That is what we used to spend on a Christmas party. Claire, we need more than this. We need our home. You have no home, I said coldly. You signed it away. And I am not giving you this money because I owe you. I owe you nothing. You slapped me. You humiliated me. You watched your son loot this company and you cheered him on. I am giving you this money so you do not starve on the street and become a PR liability for my hotel. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Liability? Is that what we are to you? We are your family. You were my family, I corrected her, leaning forward. Now you are a charitable deduction. This is a severance package, Mom. Once you take this money, our transaction is complete. Do not call me when the money runs out. Do not come here asking for a job. Do not ask me to visit Ryan in prison. You chose your favorite child a long time ago. Now you can live with the consequences of that choice. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. I heard the sound of the envelope being picked up, the sound of paper sliding against wood. It was the sound of their pride finally breaking. Take it and go, I said without turning around. And please return your keycards to security on your way out. Guests are not allowed in the executive offices. I heard the door open and close. I did not look back. I did not feel a pang of guilt. I did not feel sadness. I watched the traffic below moving in a steady, rhythmic flow. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had just cut the anchor. Now I could finally sail. The gavel hit the wood block with a finality that echoed in Ryan's bones. 3 years in a federal facility followed by 5 years of probation and restitution. It could have been worse. It could have been 10. But for a boy who had never been told no in his entire life, 3 years was an eternity. He turned around to look at the gallery, hoping to see a sympathetic face. The benches were empty. Our parents were too ashamed to be seen in a public courtroom, and I had better things to do than watch a tragedy I had predicted. But the most glaring absence was Ashley. She did not just leave him, she erased him. The divorce papers had been served to his public defender exactly 1 hour before the sentencing hearing began. Irreconcilable differences, she cited, which was legal code for the money ran out. Ashley did not waste a single second mourning the marriage. 2 days after Ryan traded his bespoke velvet jacket for a beige jumpsuit, she was spotted at Le Petit Bistro on the arm of a 60-year-old real estate developer from Boca Raton. She looked stunning in a red dress that she had likely charged to Ryan's account hours before the cards were frozen. She laughed loudly at the older man's jokes, touching his arm with a practiced intimacy that made the other patrons uncomfortable. But Chicago is a small town for the elite. The waiter pouring their wine was one of the staff members she had screamed at during the gala. He poured the Chardonnay with a sneer. The whispers traveled from table to table faster than the wine. That is the girl who stole the Porsche. That is the gold digger who testified against her husband to save her own skin. Ashley pretended not to hear them. She pretended she was still the queen bee. But she was radioactive. She had secured a new wallet, but she had lost her seat at the table. She was no longer a socialite. She was a punchline. Ryan sat on the edge of his bunk in a 6x8 cell that smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. The lights overhead buzzed with a low hum that reminded him of the neon sign he had hated. He had been stripped of the arrogance, the lies, and the delusions. Without the applause, without the yes men, without the alcohol, there was nothing left but the truth. He stared at the blank concrete wall. He replayed the last year in his mind like a movie reel he could not turn off. He thought about his father telling him he was a genius. He thought about his mother coddling him when he failed. They had loved the idea of him the successful CEO's son, but they had not loved him enough to stop him from destroying himself. They had fed the monster until it ate them all. Then he thought about me. He remembered my face when he brought the Porsche home. It was not jealousy in my eyes. It was fear. He remembered how I tried to block the crypto transfer. He remembered me begging him to read the contracts. I was the only one who had ever told him the truth. I was the only one who had tried to stop the loan. I had been the villain in his story for so long that he never realized I was the only one trying to save the protagonist. He put his head in his hands and let out a shaky breath. He wanted to call me. He wanted to say he was sorry. He wanted to tell me that I was right. But he knew I wouldn't accept the charge. And for the first time in his life, Ryan realized he didn't deserve an answer. He had thrown away the only person who had ever truly loved him without a price tag. The cell door buzzed shut, locking him in with the only thing worse than prison: his own regret. 6 months later, the revolving doors of the Phoenix Hotel never stopped spinning. The neon trash was gone, replaced by warm Art Deco lighting that made everyone look beautiful and rich. The lobby smelled of fresh white lilies and old money. We were booked solid for the next 2 quarters. The restaurant, now renamed Otis, had a 3-month waiting list. It was not just a hotel anymore. It was a machine, and I was the engineer. I stood on the rooftop terrace, the wind whipping the hem of my silk trench coat. From up here, the cars below looked like toys, and the people looked like ants. It was a view I had paid for with blood, sweat, and a check for $200,000. Otis walked up beside me, handing me a crystal tumbler of sparkling water. He looked at the skyline, then down at the valet line, which was currently 3 deep with luxury sedans. "We did good, boss," he grumbled, his voice rough with pride. "The quarterly projections are up 40%. Even the critics are calling it the comeback of the decade. They say you have the Midas touch." I took the glass. "They are wrong, Otis," I said, looking at the horizon. "Midas turned everything he touched into cold metal. He ended up starving to death because he could not eat gold. I did not just turn this place into gold, I turned it into something living. I brought back the soul." Otis chuckled. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. Your father called the front desk again today, tried to use my name to get a table for dinner, said he wanted to celebrate his birthday." I took a sip of water, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. "What did you tell him?" Otis smiled, a slow, satisfied grin. "I told him we were fully committed. I told him he could try the diner down the street. They have open seating." I nodded. "Good." I walked to the edge of the railing. For 34 years, I had thought my value was determined by how much I could endure. I thought love was a transaction where I paid in obedience and received crumbs of affection in return. I thought family was a biological mandate, a life sentence I had to serve with a smile. I was wrong. I looked at the city lights spreading out before me like a sea of diamonds. I had lost my parents. I had lost my brother. I had lost the illusion of a happy childhood. But standing there in the cold, clear air, I realized I did not feel empty. I felt heavy. Heavy with power. Heavy with self-respect. Heavy with the knowledge that I was the architect of my own destiny. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was probably a supplier or a new investor or maybe a magazine wanting an interview with the woman who rose from the ashes. I did not check it. It could wait. You know, Otis, I said, turning back to the man who had been more of a father to me in 6 months than Robert Williams had been in 3 decades. People say you cannot choose your family. But that is the biggest lie of all. You can choose. And more importantly, you can choose to fire the ones who steal from you. I raised my glass to the city, to the hotel, and to the woman reflection I saw in the glass door. She looked strong. She looked ruthless. She looked happy. To business, I said. Otis clinked his glass against mine. To family, he corrected. The real kind. I drank to that. The air was cold, but for the first time in my life, I was not freezing. I was on fire. The saga of the Ellington teaches a brutal but necessary truth. Competence is the only currency that matters in the real world, and blind loyalty is a debt that will eventually bankrupt you. Claire's journey exposes the danger of confusing love with servitude. For years, she allowed her family to exploit her skills because she believed that blood was thicker than water. However, the story demonstrates that toxic relationships, even those bonded by DNA, are simply liabilities in the business of life. Her parents and brother operated on ego and entitlement, believing their name alone was a safety net. Claire operated on facts, resilience, and boundaries. The ultimate lesson is that true power comes from the willingness to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. You cannot build a solid future on the shaky foundation of other people's delusions. Saving yourself often requires being the villain in someone else's narrative. But as Claire proved, being the villain is sometimes just another way of saying you are the only one taking responsibility. Look at your own board of directors in life. Are the people surrounding you investing in your growth, or are they just draining your resources? It is time to audit your circle and fire the liabilities.